On the morning of January 31st, 2026, at around 10:30 in the morning, two masked men walked into paved court in Richmond, southwest London, carrying a sledgehammer, and demonstrated exactly how little time it takes to steal £225,000 worth of jewelry from an independent shop in broad daylight, while shoppers stand on the pavement and watch. Pave Court is not an obscure back alley. It is a pedestrian street in one of the most recognizable and well-trafficked areas of southwest London, familiar to millions of people worldwide as a filming location for the television series Ted Lasso, a street associated in the cultural imagination with warmth and community and the particular charm of a well-kept English neighborhood. On the morning of January 31st, it became the location of one of the most audacious smash-and-grab raids the Metropolitan Police had responded to in recent memory. The target was Gregory and Company Jewelers. The method was the sledgehammer, swung repeatedly against the front display window until the glass gave way and the contents of the display became accessible. What followed was captured on witness footage that spread across social media within hours. Two hooded men scooping jewelry into a blue IKEA bag, while staff members inside the store attempted physically to stop them, fighting back against armed robbers in defense of a shop that had been a family business long before either of the men destroying its window had decided crime was a viable career path. The staff fought. The robbers were not deterred. They cleared the display, took approximately £225,000 worth of stock, and fled on foot toward Richmond Green with the IKEA bag between them. None of the stolen jewelry has ever been recovered. What the thieves had not fully accounted for was the Metropolitan Police Flying Squad, which has a specific and long-established expertise in exactly this category of crime. The investigation that followed the Richmond raid combined CCTV analysis, forensic examination of the scene, and vehicle evidence gathered across multiple lines of inquiry. Coordinated arrests were made in Essex during March and April of 2026, and 3 men found themselves facing Kingston Crown Court on charges of conspiracy to rob. Robert Clark was 50 years old, Lee Ramsey was 46, Dennis Mehmet was 28. All 3 were from Essex. All 3 pleaded guilty. All 3 received identical sentences of 5 years and 3 months, a combined total of 15 years and 9 months of imprisonment for a morning's work that lasted minutes and produced a blue IKEA bag full of jewelry that has not been seen since. The speed of the raid, the confidence of 2 men walking into a pedestrian street at 10:30 in the morning with a sledgehammer and treating an occupied jeweler as if the presence of staff and witnesses was simply not a relevant consideration, is the detail that the footage captures most viscerally. They were not subtle. They were not cautious. They walked in, they destroyed the window, they filled a bag, and they walked out toward Richmond Green while the street stood and watched and recorded it. The paved court looks exactly the same now as it did before January 31st. Gregory and Company has had its window replaced. The jewelry is still gone. The Richmond jewelry raid lasted only minutes, but it showed how boldly criminals can operate in broad daylight. The next case proves that when armed robbers believe nobody can stop them, they're sometimes very wrong. Body-worn camera footage from the Metropolitan Police shows exactly how a violent knife-point robbery spree in Earl's Court, London, was brought to an end in under 8 minutes from the moment the initial call came in to both suspects being handcuffed on the ground. According to officers involved, the call described an armed robbery, with victims describing a threat of being stabbed if they didn't hand over their phones and wallets. One suspect, on a rental bicycle, would corner victims while threatening them with what they described as a knife or machete, while a second suspect worked alongside him on foot. Officers were the first unit to respond, driving to the area with emergency lights and sirens switched off to avoid alerting the suspects. With the victims in the back of the patrol car, officers conducted what's known as a street identification, and the victims confirmed the suspects on site. Once identified, both men fled. One surrendered almost immediately to a responding officer, while the second took off running, with an officer giving chase directly. Despite knowing there was a real possibility the fleeing suspect was still armed, the officer's focus stayed on the risk he posed to anyone else nearby, treating him as someone who needed to be stopped immediately rather than allowed to keep running loose through a public area. During the pursuit, the suspect turned and told the officer he wanted to fight rather than be arrested. The officer responded by deploying incapacitant spray, then continued the chase as the suspect ran past two women on the street. Closing the distance, the officer delivered a leg strike to bring him down, then detained and arrested him on suspicion of robbery.
Floor! Go on the floor now! Put your hand behind your back! Make control 1 mile detained on the floor, Warwick Road! Palmer deployed! Male under arrest on suspicion of robbery!
Reviewing CCTV footage afterward, officers were able to see the suspect appearing to throw a knife into a nearby basement area during the chase. A subsequent playback of additional CCTV footage while officers were still on scene revealed that both suspects had disposed of the stolen items in nearby bins. Searching those bins, officers recovered numerous mobile phones, a watch, and a wallet, matching the property described by the victims. In total, 2 knives were seized in connection with the incident, along with the recovered stolen property. Both suspects were arrested and taken into custody. Officers involved in the response described the incident as exactly the kind of call that reflects why they joined the job in the first place, noting that the suspects had shown no apparent fear of consequences or the law throughout the robbery spree, and that stopping them that night required officers willing to act decisively and quickly before anyone else could be hurt. What makes this case notable isn't ambiguity or unresolved questions, but the speed and coordination of the response itself. From the initial report of an armed robbery to both suspects being detained, the entire operation was resolved in under 8 minutes, a response that combined quick identification from the victims, a pursuit that accounted for the real risk of an armed suspect, and follow-up CCTV work that recovered the stolen property, even after the suspects had already tried to get rid of the evidence by dumping it in nearby bins. The footage stands as a clear example of a fast-moving, well-coordinated police response to an active armed robbery spree, ending with both suspects in custody, the weapons recovered, and the stolen property returned to its rightful place in the investigation, all within a matter of minutes from the moment the initial call came in. That robbery spree ended with both suspects in custody. The next attack was on an entirely different scale, one that brought central London to a standstill in just a matter of minutes. On the night of June 3, 2017, shortly before 10 p.m., 3 men carried out a coordinated terrorist attack in central London that would leave 8 innocent people dead and 48 others injured, brought to an end within 8 minutes by an armed police response now well documented through both CCTV footage and inquest testimony. The attackers, later identified as Khurram Butt, 27, Rashid Redwan, 30, and Youssef Zagba, 22, began by driving a rented van into pedestrians on London Bridge. After abandoning the vehicle, the 3 men moved on foot into the nearby Borough Market area, a popular destination for locals and tourists filled with restaurants and pubs, where they carried out a series of stabbings while wearing fake explosive vests designed to make them appear armed with suicide bombs. Surveillance footage that later surfaced publicly captured the final chaotic moments of the attack in vivid detail. The men were seen attempting to enter a pub, only to find its doors already barricaded, the attackers having already stabbed people elsewhere before reaching that point. Unable to get inside, they turned on a young man passing nearby. As the attack continued, another bystander threw a chair in an attempt to intervene and stop them. It was at that moment that a City of London police armed response vehicle arrived on scene, officers rushing out almost immediately in an effort to reach the man being attacked. The footage shows no hesitation in their response, one officer moved with enough speed that he physically collided with one of the attackers, both men going down together before the officer got back up and raised his weapon. Just feet away, a second attacker rushed directly at another officer, attempting to stab him. That officer stepped back to create enough space to aim and fire, nearly losing his footing in the process. According to reporting on the footage, no more than 20 seconds passed from the moment the officers left their vehicle to the moment all three attackers lay motionless on the ground. In that extremely short window, officers fired dozens of rounds, all while assessing that the canisters strapped to the attackers' bodies could be genuine suicide vests rather than the fakes they later turned out to be, a distinction that could not have been safely assumed in the moment given the stakes involved. In total, 8 firearms officers, 3 from the City of London Police and 5 from the Metropolitan Police, fired 46 rounds combined, fatally shooting all 3 attackers on Stony Street, near the Wheatsheaf pub in Borough Market. 2 additional Metropolitan Police armed response vehicles arrived shortly after as the situation was brought under control. Given the seriousness of any police shooting, the incident was independently investigated, as required by law, with what was then the Independent Police Complaints Commission examining CCTV footage from within Borough Market covering the majority of the incident relevant to their investigation. That investigation, along with an inquest held 2 years later in 2019, ultimately concluded that the 3 attackers had been lawfully killed. Jurors found that the officers involved honestly believed lethal force was necessary to protect both themselves and members of the public, given every indication in the moment suggested they were confronting suicide bombers actively attempting to kill both officers and civilians. Notably, despite the intensity of what they'd just experienced, the officers involved reportedly returned to duty shortly afterward, rejoining the broader manhunt given ongoing concerns at the time that additional attackers might still be at large elsewhere in the city. What the footage captures isn't ambiguous in any sense. It shows in real time the extreme danger the responding officers placed themselves in, closing distance with armed, actively violent attackers within seconds of arriving on scene, while simultaneously demonstrating the sheer brutality and indifference of the attackers themselves toward the victims they targeted throughout the rampage. The entire confrontation, from the officers stepping out of their vehicle to all 3 attackers being stopped, unfolded in under half a minute, a stark illustration of how quickly a situation like this can escalate and how narrow the window is for an armed response to prevent it from claiming even more lives than it already had. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this countdown, make sure to subscribe. We spend hours researching real criminal cases and finding the footage behind them to bring you the complete story. And trust me, the remaining cases only become more disturbing. The London Bridge attack changed the city forever. The next crime wasn't terrorism, but for one tourist, an ordinary day in London became a nightmare just as quickly. A tourist visiting London ended up at the center of a violent daylight mugging, caught on camera in an incident that's since drawn attention for how openly aggressive the attack was in the middle of a public area. The footage shows the tourist going about an ordinary visit, the kind of relaxed, unguarded moment that comes naturally when exploring an unfamiliar city, phone or camera likely in hand, taking in the sights the way most visitors do. That sense of ease disappears the moment a group of men approaches him with clear intent, closing in quickly enough that he has little time to react before they're already surrounding him. Rather than a single individual attempting a quiet, low-profile theft, the footage shows a coordinated group effort, several men working together to overwhelm him physically, using their numbers to prevent any real chance of escape or effective resistance. The attack escalates quickly from confrontation to actual violence, the group robbing him by force rather than relying on distraction or stealth, the way pickpocketing incidents typically unfold. What makes the footage so unsettling isn't just the theft itself, but the brazen nature of it, carried out in public, in broad daylight, with enough people involved that bystanders nearby would have had little ambiguity about what was actually happening in front of them. The tourist, outnumbered and caught off guard, had little ability to defend himself once the group made their move, the entire incident playing out with a speed and coordination that left him with no real opportunity to get away before it was over. Incidents like this have become a point of growing concern for visitors to major cities, where large tourist populations moving through public spaces can become targets for exactly this kind of group-based street robbery, relying on speed, numbers, and the element of surprise to overwhelm a victim before help can arrive. What happened to the group responsible, and whether any arrests followed the incident, isn't detailed in the footage itself. What's clear is the outcome for the tourist involved, an ordinary visit to the city turning, within seconds, into a frightening and violent robbery carried out by multiple attackers acting together, leaving him with nothing but the experience itself and whatever footage happened to capture the attack as it unfolded. Being robbed is traumatic enough. The next attacker wasn't after money at all. His victims were chosen for something far more disturbing. On April 29, 2026, shortly after 11 a.m., the Metropolitan Police responded to a violent attack in Golders Green, North London, an area home to a large Jewish community, an incident that was later declared a terrorist attack and captured in part on body-worn camera footage that police subsequently released to the public. According to the verified account of events, the attack actually began earlier that morning in Southwark, where the suspect allegedly attempted to murder a Muslim friend who sustained minor injuries in that initial assault. From there, the suspect made his way to Golders Green, where he stabbed two visibly Jewish men on Highfield Avenue and Golders Green Road, a 76-year-old and a 34-year-old. Both men were taken to hospital and listed in stable condition following the attack. The suspect, a 45-year-old British national born in Somalia, was ultimately charged with 3 counts of attempted murder in connection with all 3 victims, reflecting the full scope of the attack rather than just the stabbings that took place in Golders Green itself. Body-worn camera footage released by the Metropolitan Police shows officers arriving on scene within minutes of the emergency calls coming in. The footage captures officers repeatedly shouting commands for the suspect to drop the knife as they moved to confront him directly. Rather than complying, the suspect reportedly continued to pose an active threat and attempted to attack the responding officers as well. Officers ultimately deployed a taser to bring him down, followed by physically restraining him on the ground to bring the situation fully under control. Given the nature of the attack and the apparent targeting involved, counterterrorism policing took over the investigation after officers concluded that the suspect appeared to have deliberately targeted visibly Jewish individuals during the Golders Green portion of the attack. The Metropolitan Police formally declared the incident a terrorist attack as a result. Metropolitan Police Commissioner Mark Rowley publicly praised the responding officers, along with community volunteers who assisted during the incident, crediting their courage, professionalism, and rapid response with preventing further harm and additional injuries during an extremely dangerous, fast-moving situation. What makes this footage so significant isn't ambiguity about what happened, but the clarity it offers into exactly how quickly officers were able to locate, confront, and subdue an active armed suspect who had already attacked multiple people across 2 separate locations that same morning. The body-worn camera captures the tension of that confrontation directly, officers repeatedly ordering the suspect to drop his weapon while he continued to resist and even turn on them, right up until the taser deployment finally brought the immediate threat to an end. The case has drawn significant attention, given both the apparent targeting of a specific community and the broader context of an attacker who had already attempted to kill someone earlier that same day in an entirely different part of the city before continuing on to Golders Green. For the community there, an area with deep historical and cultural ties to London's Jewish population, the attack has understandably raised serious concerns about safety and the targeting of visibly identifiable religious or ethnic groups in public spaces. As the investigation continues under counter-terrorism policing, the footage itself stands as a clear, documented record of how the response unfolded in real time, from the initial commands to drop the knife, through the taser deployment, to the suspect finally being restrained, offering the public a direct look at exactly how close the situation came to escalating further before officers were able to bring it to an end. Thankfully, officers stopped that attack before even more lives were lost. The next killer, however, managed to disappear across Europe for years before justice finally caught up with him. On October 11, 2015, in the early hours of the morning, 21-year-old Josh Hansen was murdered inside the RE bar in Hillingdon, West London, killed in an attack that would eventually lead to one of the most extensive manhunts in recent British criminal history. According to court evidence, Shane O'Brien slashed Hansen's neck, inflicting a catastrophic wound measuring 37 centimeters, roughly 14.5 inches. CCTV footage released during the trial showed Hansen clutching his neck and stumbling as blood poured from the injury. Jurors heard that after the attack, O'Brien walked out of the bar calmly, showing no visible urgency or panic in the immediate aftermath of what the judge would later describe as a grotesque, violent, and entirely unnecessary attack on an innocent man. Rather than fleeing haphazardly, O'Brien's movements in the hours and days that followed were methodical. Investigators traced his car to Camber Sands in East Sussex, where he was recognized by staff at a nearby pub, helping detectives reconstruct his early escape route. From there, he made his way to Ashford, Kent, where CCTV captured him eating at a restaurant before spending time at the Ashford Designer Outlet, carefully selecting new clothes to alter his appearance. Behavior investigators later highlighted specifically because of how deliberate and unhurried it was, rather than the actions of someone in a desperate rush to disappear. O'Brien then enlisted a contact to arrange a privately chartered 4-seat aircraft flying out of Biggin Hill Airport to the Netherlands before officers were able to apprehend him. From there, using false identity documents, he moved through multiple countries across Europe, including Germany, Belgium, and the Czech Republic, changing his appearance along the way by growing a beard and long hair and altering his tattoos. In 2017, he was arrested following a scuffle in a Prague nightclub, giving police the false name Enzo Melancelli before fleeing while out on bail. Despite being placed on both Europol and Interpol's most wanted lists, O'Brien continued to evade capture, aided by what investigators described as a network of associates helping him stay hidden, including tracing the barber and tattoo artists who'd helped him change his identity along the way. His time on the run finally ended after he contacted Scotland Yard himself to discuss a possible surrender, with the proposed location shifting from Budapest before Romanian authorities ultimately located and detained him in Cluj-Napoca on March 23, 2019, more than 3.5 years after Hansen's murder. He was extradited back to the United Kingdom on April 5, 2019, where body-worn video captured Metropolitan Police officers taking him into custody as part of the extradition process. O'Brien was convicted of murder and sentenced at the Old Bailey to life in prison, with a minimum term of 26 years. Sentencing him, Judge Nigel Lickley KC called the killing a grotesque, violent, and totally unnecessary attack on an innocent man, telling O'Brien directly that the reason behind his actions might never be fully explained to anyone else, though he himself knew the truth of it. During the trial, O'Brien had claimed he felt threatened by Hansen's body language and had only intended to scare him, a claim that did little to soften the reaction in the courtroom. As he was led away from the dock, members of the public gallery shouted, "Coward," toward him. In victim impact statements, Hansen's mother, Tracy, described her son as considerate, kind, and generous, saying he had been taken from his family suddenly, abruptly, viciously, and violently. His sister, Brooke, told the court he had been not just her brother but her best friend, describing his infectious smile and magnetic presence, while sharing that she had lived with anxiety and post-traumatic stress since his death, often wondering whether she could have somehow protected him. Detective Chief Inspector Noel McHugh, who led the investigation, said O'Brien had believed he could evade justice with the help of his associates, but was ultimately proven wrong, adding that it was only once sentencing had concluded that the reality seemed to fully set in, that O'Brien had finally been caught, convicted, and would be removed from society for a very long time to come. Shane O'Brien spent years running from the consequences of a single violent decision. The next case proves it doesn't take a murderer to ruin someone's life. Sometimes a few seconds of uncontrolled anger are enough. On September 2nd, 2024, mobile phone footage captured a violent road rage attack on Leytonstone High Street in East London, showing a motorist physically assaulting a Royal Mail postman in broad daylight. An incident that was reported publicly the following day once the footage began circulating online. The confrontation began after a brief road rage dispute, apparently triggered by the Royal Mail van having been driving in front of the other vehicle shortly before the incident. The motorist, dressed in a black t-shirt and shorts, approached the postman, who was wearing his red Royal Mail uniform, near the open driver's side door of his van. According to the footage, the motorist could be heard shouting at him directly, accusing him of driving aggressively in front of him moments earlier. What followed escalated quickly from a verbal dispute into physical violence. The attacker grabbed the postman by the neck and forcefully shoved him into the open driver's door of his own van, the two men grappling in the street as the confrontation continued. The entire incident was captured by a bystander on a 21-second mobile phone video, footage clear enough to show exactly how the confrontation unfolded from the initial approach through the physical assault itself. Royal Mail responded to the incident by condemning the attack directly, stating that it was a shocking assault and that the company condemns any form of physical or verbal abuse directed at its employees. The company confirmed that the incident had been formally reported to the Metropolitan Police and issued a public appeal for any witnesses to come forward with additional information. Based on publicly available reporting at the time, the identity of the attacker was not confirmed, and no arrest or prosecution had been reported in the initial coverage of the incident. Similarly, there were no reports indicating the postman suffered serious physical injuries as a result of the assault, though the footage itself makes clear how forceful and aggressive the confrontation actually was in the moment. What makes this incident so unsettling isn't ambiguity about what happened, since the footage captures the entire sequence clearly, from the initial shouted accusation through the physical assault itself. It's the specific target of the attack that's drawn particular concern: a uniformed postal worker simply doing his job and making deliveries along his route, becoming the victim of a violent, unprovoked physical assault triggered by nothing more than a perceived driving grievance from another motorist. Incidents like this have increasingly raised concerns about the safety of delivery and postal workers more broadly. Professionals who spend their entire working day navigating public roads and interacting with the public as an unavoidable part of their job, often with little ability to avoid confrontations that can escalate as quickly and violently as this one did. For Royal Mail and its employees, the footage stands as a stark example of exactly the kind of unprovoked, aggressive confrontation the company has publicly condemned, and one they've said they're taking seriously enough to actively involve police and seek out any additional witnesses who might help identify the man responsible. Before we reveal the final case, remember, some of London's worst crimes aren't carefully planned or driven by profit. Sometimes they're acts of violence so random that nobody nearby has time to understand what's happening until it's already over. On April 30th, 2024, beginning at around 6:50 a.m., a violent 20-minute rampage unfolded in the suburb of Hainault, in northeast London, leaving a 14-year-old boy dead and 4 other people injured, in an attack that would later be tried at the Old Bailey and result in one of the longest sentences handed down in a non-terrorism-related case in recent memory. The attack began when Marcus Arduini Monso, driving a grey Ford Transit van, struck a pedestrian, Donato Iwule, who was reportedly catapulted into a nearby garden before the van crashed into a concrete pillar and fence in Thurlow Gardens, near Hainault Underground Station. Rather than fleeing the scene of what bystanders initially assumed was a traffic accident, Monzo got out of the van, asked a woman where he was, then pulled a sword from his trousers and slashed Iwul in the neck before running from the scene. Monzo then forced his way into a nearby home, attacking a 35-year-old man as he slept in bed, inflicting serious injuries to his hand and causing significant blood loss. The man's relatives later credited him with protecting the rest of his family from further harm during the intrusion. Leaving that property, Monzo approached 14-year-old Daniel Anjorin from behind. as the boy walked to school wearing headphones. Witnesses said nearby residents tried to warn him, but he likely couldn't hear them over his music. Monzo slashed Daniel's neck from behind and stabbed him in the chest, fatally wounding him. 2 police officers who arrived and attempted to subdue Monzo were also attacked as he fled down a nearby alleyway, with a female officer slashed as he escaped. And body-worn camera footage later shown at trial captured the moment Metropolitan Police Inspector Molloy Campbell was struck with what he described in court as a large sword, leaving him bleeding from his hand. Ambulance camera footage also showed Monzo attempting to attack paramedics as they arrived to treat Daniel, striking the vehicle's windows with his sword. Officers eventually cornered him in a resident's driveway, deploying multiple taser rounds before tackling him to the ground and placing him under arrest. Investigators confirmed the attack was not terrorism-related, and Monzo was not known to any of his victims. Court testimony from his brother, Eduardo, described a significant personality shift following spiritual retreats in India and the Amazon, including consuming ayahuasca, withdrawing from family, and eventually claiming a spiritual guru he'd once followed was a demon who had cast a spell on him. No trace of DMT was found in his system after arrest. The court also heard that before the attack, Monzo had killed, skinned, and deboned his pet cat. On June 25, 2025, Monzo was found guilty of murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, wounding with intent, aggravated burglary, and weapons possession. The Crown Prosecution Service stated his mental state was driven by his own cannabis misuse, meaning he remained fully responsible for the devastation caused. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 40 years, reduced to 38 years and 309 days, accounting for time already served on remand. Around 300 people later gathered at Hainault Tube Station for a vigil in Daniel's memory, and Arsenal fans, whom Daniel had supported, held a moment of tribute during a Premier League match following his death. And those were some of the most disturbing crimes that happened in London. Which case shocked you the most? Let us know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another countdown featuring real cases and the footage behind them. Thanks for watching, because sometimes the most disturbing crimes aren't the ones hidden from the public. They're the ones that happen in broad daylight, with cameras rolling, leaving the entire world to watch what unfolded.